Record. Hide the floating panels. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And the Cosmic Evolution Project, I've kind of renamed it to let people know that I'm really interested in biology and earth sciences. Cosmic and Global Evolution Project helps current and future teachers, informal science educators, and others, so others includes all of you, explore and explain the evolutionary history of the universe and the earth, from the Big Bang to big brains and artificial intelligence. And what we do that's a little different is we focus on what nature does, not what scientists do. A lot of times talks and projects are telling you the latest scientific breakthrough. We're trying to explain everything that people have learned throughout the scientific profession so that you actually get the story. And there's my email address if you'd like it. And at the bottom, we'll show this a few times, is a link to our webpage that Elise and I created. All the pictures that are in this talk are on that with text explaining it. And Elise has, I have something else on my other screen. Written most of the text actually. So we have a provocative title. A friend of mine who was a vice president of Audubon told me this summer that at the beginning of summer that there are beneficial viruses. And I said, oh yeah? So we ended up spending the whole summer on this. So are they good or bad is the provocative title we gave. And again, we know that all of you have made sacrifices and had struggles, and some of you may have had personal, family, or friends with health problems. We have no intention of making a joke or downplaying everything that people have struggled with. But we did want to put this all in perspective. Some viruses will kill you if you don't kill them first, but most viruses cannot harm us because they're very specific. And there are beneficial viruses that may foster evolution, enhance biodiversity, and fight climate change and ocean acidification by sequestering the carbon, helping sequester that. So we're going to talk a lot about both those. And we're also going to play a little game. And viruses that attack bacteria are called bacteriophages, that you may or may not know that. So that's the last thing. Well, it's going to be in the middle, but that's one of our three topics. So our theme that wearing masks and respecting social distancing are very effective. And again, I'm not trying to make a joke out of all this, but the virus loves people who don't pay attention to it. And zoonosis is a process. And we have a lot of Wikipedia articles that we've printed the PDF on the web page. You can look up words like zoonosis and find out what that means, but that's how they jump from one species to another. We first practiced this talk with a school that a friend of mine has been running a charity for in Cambodia. And I got this, and we talked to a bunch of college students who had gone to the school and were now in college. And in Cambodia, they've had a very low rate of health problems and a very low rate of death, almost nothing, because in Asia, people are used to wearing masks, and they often live in pretty crowded conditions or in small villages where people are very close. And so this illustrates the idea of social distancing and wearing masks. So this is a picture of actually the school in Cambodia that we gave our talk to. So we're going to play this game. I'm not going to belabor all the benefits and features of it now. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Elise to do the hard part of the program.
All right, thank you. So to start off, we just really want to nail in the fact that viruses are not living cells, but they're classified as particles that contain genetic material like DNA and RNA, and they're wrapped inside a protein coat. So viruses follow some of the rules for being alive that scientists use to classify, but not all of them. The main one being they can't reproduce or clone themselves on their own. They need the help of a host cell. The only goal of a virus is to infect host cells to make more viruses. They don't have the machinery or the ability to create more viruses, so they need the help of that host cell again. So the general goal is we infect the cells with the appropriate machinery, we inject the viral genetic material into that host cell. The cell then uses that viral genetic material to create proteins and create more viruses, which then are released to infect more host cells. So on this slide, we've included a couple pictures of different viruses. The one on the left
Oh,
being...
I'm sorry. I got ahead of you.
Oh.
Go ahead.
The one on the left being the most famous one right now. The one in the middle is probably a type of virus that infects a host cell. It has this viral shape that we see often. And the one on the far right is a bacteriophage. It infects only bacteria, and it looks super high-tech and interesting in my opinion. And on the bottom, we just have a pretty simple picture of how a virus may encounter a cell. Because it's not alive, they don't go looking for them. But if it happens upon a host cell, it redirects itself to be able to inject its genetic material.
So the word coronavirus, the word corona refers to crown, and like the sun has a corona around it, and the spikes that stick out are what makes it look like a crown to the scientists. And so just in case you haven't picked up on that little tidbit, and it's these protein spikes which do the attachment for these things that affect us. What fascinates me about the bacteriophage is it looks like something that landed on the moon. So here it is landing on the moon.
So viruses are everywhere. Scientists estimate that there are more viruses on Earth than there are stars in the universe, or even grains of sand on every beach on Earth. So there's a massive amount of them. But we don't need to be afraid of this many viruses on Earth because most actually can't infect humans. Most of them are highly specialized to infect bacteria. So viruses in general are very specific. One type of virus can only infect one type of host cell. So say there's a virus in your body that infects liver cells. That virus can't necessarily go and infect your lungs. But there are some instances where viruses can cross over species. Dr. Field mentioned zoonosis earlier. Zoonosis is very rare, but it does happen in species that are closely related, like monkeys and humans. And it's really dangerous when this happens because this virus is infecting someone that has no immunity, and its immune system has no idea what to do with the virus. So that's why a situation like coronavirus is so dangerous and deadly to us. So as I mentioned, most viruses infect bacteria. So on the left, we have a picture of a typical bacteriophage infecting a simple bacteria cell. We see that bacteriophage with its genetic material landing on the bacteria, injecting its genetic material, which will then integrate into the bacterial DNA to be reproduced and create more viruses. So on the right, we break down two different types of viruses that we see on Earth. One is Lytic, which is the more simple version of viral reproducing. So we see a bacteriophage on a cell. It injects its red genetic material, which is then integrated into the green circular DNA. It's then replicated, translated, the whole thing that creates new viruses. So that's the simple version, Lytic. But lysogenic viruses are a bit more interesting, in my opinion, because they have the ability to have longer lasting effects. So for lysogenic viruses, we have the same beginning process. We inject that genetic material, it mixes in, but it actually isn't replicated and reproduced right away. The viral genetic material is able to hang out in that original DNA. And this can actually be passed down into new generations before it's awoken and begins to create new viruses. So let's say this is a bacteria that can replicate itself by splitting in two. When it splits, those two new daughter cells will have that viral DNA in it. And it also can be passed on in multicellular organisms like humans if it's infecting a sperm or egg cell, that can be passed on to the child or the baby of the original host. So in this way, lysogenic viruses can actually influence evolution in it because it mixes up new genetic material. These are called retroviruses, and retroviruses have played a huge part in human evolution in general. We see a lot of retrovirus DNA inside human DNA. Some scientists say that we're more viral DNA than we are human because of all these past retroviruses that infected our ancestors and were passed on to us. The most interesting example of this is that mammalian placenta, like humans have, is actually coded for by an ancient retrovirus. So we wouldn't be able to reproduce or carry children in this way if it wasn't for a past virus.
And we're starting to study bacteria next, and I'm also starting to read that bacteria play a role in influencing our genetic material too. So it's amazing how much things that we normally don't think about play a role.
We're easily influenced. All right, so
I'll say this. This is an example of why Elise is giving most of the talk.
Yeah, so because viruses are everywhere, we're going to want to have some sort of immunity to be able to protect, especially bacteria, because there's so many viruses that want to kill them. They need to have some way to defend themselves so they're not blown up every time a virus is anywhere near them. So bacteria have a form of immunity using CRISPR, and it's a very basic sense of immunity in which it can recognize proteins and genetic sequences that are non-self and distinguish them from proteins in other cells that are self. So CRISPR works by, this is a very simple overview, by recognizing genetic material that is not from the bacteria and acting as scissors to cut that genetic material out so it's not integrated into the protein, replicated, and reproduced. So that means this line of viruses die, it's not able to reproduce and either kill the bacteria itself or infect the rest of its population. But yeah, this is a very basic overview, and CRISPR is super cool and on the forefront of scientific research. So we'll be hearing a lot more about that in the near future.
Yeah, so the bacteria invented CRISPR with the Cas9 protein about billions of years ago, and the Nobel Prize this year, Dr. Doudna, I think it is, won the Nobel Prize for CRISPR just, I guess, this past month. So we're catching up to the bacteria. We're a couple billion years behind, but we're getting there. And CRISPR is kind of a double-edged sword where it's very powerful, and anything that's powerful can also be very dangerous in the wrong hands. Speaking of hands.
That was a good intro.
Yeah.
So because viruses are harmful to people, and because of things like zoonosis, where our immune system can't fight these viruses as effectively as we want them to, we have to have some reinforcements, and we do. These come in hand sanitizers and cleaning surfaces. So I know at the beginning of the pandemic, they were like, use hand sanitizer, wash your hands. And I was like, okay, sure, but why? So this is why. So as I mentioned before, viruses are wrapped in this protein coat. And proteins are very sensitive if they're exposed to extreme changes in temperature, pH, or just extreme environments in general. So the way hand sanitizer works and other cleaning supplies and surfaces is that it creates an environment that the protein coat does not want to hang out in. So it begins to become denatured and unwind and unravel. So it's not fitting into those perfect folds that it was before, holding that DNA in. So when its protein coat becomes denatured, it's ineffective. It's rendered completely useless. It can't attach to a surface. It can't inject its DNA. So you've killed that virus. Yeah, so denaturing, it's good.
So I had my annual physical last month, and my doctor, I talked to him about some of this because there's always been this question of whether hand sanitizers are more antibacterial or antiviral. And he did tell me that he still believes the 20 seconds of hand washing with soap and water is more effective at completely getting the virus off your hands compared to these methods. So it just depends on where you are and what you have, what kind of environment you have. You can carry a hand sanitizer when you need to, but it's not a complete substitute for hand washing.
Yep. When in doubt, do both.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So again, this is a very simplified model of the human immune response. But if hand sanitizers and all that doesn't work, we have to have a way to fight off viruses and other toxins, pathogens in our body that could render us harm. So our immune systems are super powerful. They have gone millions of years of evolution to become as powerful and as strong as they are now. And the basic way the immune system works is it recognizes when there is an infected cell. It then uses different cells to kill or eat that infected cell so that it cannot burst and release new viruses into the body. That's how the very basic immune system works. And when this doesn't work, we need some help by a vaccine. Vaccines just train our body to recognize pathogens such as a virus quicker and faster, so they're able to properly fight and recognize pathogens in the body.
So if you're a single-celled organism and you're infected, it could kill you. If you're a multicellular organism like us, you can have cells that go around attacking the virus or the infected cells. So you can afford the luxury, as in the lower left corner there, of killing an infected cell if you have lots of other cells in your system. So there's been levels and levels of evolution and immune responses that have evolved. And when you think about how immune systems come about, you realize that a lot of ancestors suffered greatly or died to make the selection process that led to the kinds of immune systems that plants and animals and humans have. And I wish these bottles that say vaccine COVID-19 actually had the vaccine in them, but we're still holding out for that, and hopefully we'll get there. So we are going to, I'm going to pause this recording or stop this one.